Welcome to Fabric Monday. On this week, we will talk about access to on-premise and external data from Microsoft Fabric. First, let's talk about how Azure Data Factory works. We are talking about Microsoft Fabric. Why do we need to know how Azure Data Factory works? Because it's interesting to compare how the old technology works with the current technology. It's very interesting to make a comparison between both. So let's talk about how Azure Data Factory works. Azure Data Factory has pipelines and data flows. Pipelines and data flows. The pipelines, they are used to bring data from external sources. When I say external sources, I'm talking about some external data source which is considered to be outside our data lake. So the pipeline is used to bring data from these external sources to inside the data lake. While the data flows are intended to make transformations on the data which is already in the data lake, already considered to be local to the data lake. In this way, the pipelines have a very broad set of connectors, while the data flows have a limited set of connectors. The data flow can access a very limited set of sources, while pipelines can access way more sources. I have here a pipeline with the copy activity. If I start creating a new data set, it asks me the sources that I would like to use. Take a look on the sources that I have available. All the sources I have available to be used in the pipeline. All the sources can be used in a pipeline. However, if I try to do the same in a data flow, the result is very different. I have a limited set of sources for the data flow, and all other sources, which appear here as well, they are disabled. They can't be directly used in a data flow, only in a pipeline. So the data flow has a limited set of sources, while the pipeline is intended to go outside and get the data for us. And besides this big difference between pipelines and data flows on Azure Data Factory, pipelines, they can also use what's called self-hosted integration runtime. The self-hosted integration runtime is used to get data from on-premise environment or from private networks. It's a software that we install on the on-premise environment or on private network. What do I mean about private network? For example, a network on AWS. But you don't want the connection to cross the internet. You want to access the data from AWS, but you don't want a connection to cross the public internet or to not be very safe. So you can install on the private network a self-hosted integration runtime. Pipelines can use the self-hosted integration runtime to get data from external sources. Data flows can't use the self-hosted integration runtime. They just can't use them. We have here the data factory, the manage integration runtime. I can here create an integration runtime, Azure or self-hosted, Azure or self-hosted integration runtime. And the Azure is the auto-resolve integration runtime, while the self-hosted is a software that we install on another network. We need to follow a procedure to install this software. The pipelines can use the self-hosted integration runtime, but the data flows, they can't. What's a self-hosted integration runtime? We are talking, this is a software that we install on another network, but let's simplify this. It's a data gateway, but it's specific to Azure Data Factory, to be used with Azure Data Factory. In Power BI, you know the concept about data gateways. You install data gateways to get data from on-premise environment to Power BI, for example. The self-hosted integration runtime is absolutely the same. It's like a data gateway, but it's specific to Azure Data Factory. And in the same way as an on-premise data gateway that we use in Power BI environment, this self-hosted integration runtime, either the self-hosted integration runtime or the on-premise data gateway, they have a very secure method of connection. They use a service called Azure Relay. Azure Relay is a service that was born together Azure Service Bus. That's why some images still show these services using Azure Service Bus, because Azure Relay was in the past very related to Azure Service Bus. What Azure Relay does? Azure Relay makes it impossible for someone from outside to open a connection to a private network. It's the private network which needs to open the connection to the cloud. And then, once the connection is established to the cloud can request the data from the private network. So, Azure Relay is a middle service to establish this kind of connection. You can find this information on Microsoft website. You can see here Azure Relay. There is a link here for information related to Azure Relay. Now let's talk a bit about medallion architecture and landing zones. Why we need to talk about this? In this case, we'll be talking about architecture, right? Yes, we'll be talking about architecture. Because the possibilities with Microsoft Fabric are so huge. There are so many different possibilities and combinations to get the data from external sources that we need to think how we would like to build our architecture. There is a common architecture, which is the medallion architecture for data lakes, and usually we know mostly the bronze, silver, and gold layer. Bronze, silver, and gold layer we are used to build on our data lakes. But there is one additional zone, which is landing zone. In many documentation, you face the landing zone as an option zone. A place where you put the data exactly as it is on the source before making any transformation on the data to be inserted into the bronze layer. So the data in the landing zone is exactly as it is on the source. In my personal opinion, I like to have a landing zone. I like it a lot. Why? Because on the landing zone, we can make blocks of data that we are ingesting in the data lake. We create a different folder for each ingestion process. Let's imagine that we are doing the ingestion once a day. So we create a folder once a day and put on that folder the data that we are ingesting into the lake. Why is this important? Why do we need to keep track of all this? This is important. The data lake can become the single source of truth of your environment, your corporation. You need to be able to track where the data came from. You need to be able to track the lineage of the data. By having the exact block of data that you ingested every day, you can track exactly on which day one specific record was inserted, on which day one specific value was changed, and so on. That's why I like the landing zone a lot. And if possible, I would like to build data lakes with the landing zone. Let's see how this works in relation to Microsoft Fabric. Microsoft Fabric has what could be a natural landing zone. Here you see a data lake. In Microsoft Fabric, on the data lakes on Microsoft Fabric, we have the tables area and the files area. The files area of a data lake on Fabric can be used to build a landing zone. So it's a natural candidate to build the landing zone. Now let's talk about the pipelines on Microsoft Fabric pipelines. They have some limitations and they are a bit different than what we would expect. Many people is used to say the pipelines from Data Fabric now work inside Microsoft Fabric, which is inside the Power BI environment. Correct? Not exactly. The pipelines on Fabric, they don't support the data gateway. They don't support the data gateway from Power BI because they came from Azure Data Factory, and the self-hosted integration runtime is not supported as well. So you have no way using a pipeline to get data from inside a private network on an on-premise environment. You can't do that using a pipeline. They have a limited set of connectors. Whoa! Is the opposite than the Azure Data Factory? Because on Azure Data Factory, the pipelines were the ones with the most connectors. Exactly to be possible to go outside and get the data from inside the lake. But in Fabric, it's not like this. In Fabric, the pipelines have a limited set of connectors. And they only access lakehouse or lakehouse in the same workspace. This is a strange limitation. I personally get annoyed with this because I don't like to mix things. I would like the possibility to organize things and separate one workspace for the pipeline, one workspace for the lakehouse, and so on. The pipelines are only capable to access the lakehouse if the lakehouse is on the same workspace. This is a strange limitation. And they can drop files in the lakehouse files area, either in the lakehouse files area or in the lakehouse tables area. Doesn't mind. So you can choose if the pipeline will drop the file in the files area or in the tables area. Here I have a pipeline. Let's use the copy assistant. In this example, I can use any of these sources. Our categories. See, these are the connectors available, and compared to the connectors that we may need, this is considerably limited. And let us imagine that I try to connect to an Azure SQL database, for example. And the option is really Azure SQL database. Then I'll create a new connection to Azure SQL database, and there is no option in this window to create a new connection to use a data gateway. We can't use the Power BI data gateway in a pipeline. So this makes things more difficult for a pipeline. We need to have a direct connection to the source to be able to load the data. Only as an example, let me get the data from Lakehouse and mind the objects of Microsoft Fabric that we can access from the pipeline. These objects are marked as workspace. This means that the pipeline can only access these objects if they are in the same workspace. So existing Lakehouse lists only the lakehouse in the same workspace as the pipeline. Then I can choose my lakehouse, and then the source can be the tables area of the lakehouse or the files area of the lakehouse. Let's get an example from the files area of the lakehouse. Then dimension city, back here. Next. Then I choose the lakehouse as the destination. Same thing, I can only get from the lakehouse from the same workspace where the pipeline is located. Then next, then you can see I can drop to the tables area or to the files area. Now let's talk about the Microsoft Fabric Data Flows Gen 2. They support Data Gateway, but only the latest versions of the Data Gateway. If your Data Gateway is not updated, it will throw strange errors when using the Data Flows Gen 2. The target can be in any workspace. Oh, so the data flows Gen 2 are better than the pipelines because the pipelines are restricted to something in the same workspace. But for the data flows Gen 2, I can get from any workspace, both as source or as destination. Yes. But it only drops to the tables area. It doesn't drop to the file area. So this makes more difficult to create a landing zone. That's why I started talking about architecture, to highlight the difficulties that you would have choosing when to use a data flow Gen 2 or when to use a Fabric pipeline. The data flow Gen 2 only drops to the tables area. So, let me use SQL Server as a source. I use localhost. I have a SQL Server on my local machine. Advent 3 works. And it identifies an existing connection, local inventory, to my on-premise SQL Server. That's great. And it will be using this connection. So I can use a data flow Gen 2 to get data from external sources and private networks, while I can't use the Fabric pipelines for the same. They are more limited in relation to the same. That's a problem. And it's a very big difference from Data Factory because it seems to be almost the opposite in Data Factory. Then let's say that I get a table like big transaction history, for example. Great. I'm creating the source, getting the source from my local SQL Server. And then I need to set the destination for this source. Destination. The destinations possible are only these 4. What this means? The destination is intended to be in the lake. Lakehouse. So I can choose my lakehouse. And what I see is a list of workspaces in Power BI. A list of workspaces in Power BI. What does this mean? This means that I can get any lakehouse and choose to which lakehouse I would like to drop this new table. For example, Malta Fabric Demo has a lakehouse, Lakehouse Demo has a lakehouse. So I can get one of these lakehouse in different workspace and drop the information there. But I can only drop the information inside the tables area of the lakehouse. I cannot drop the information inside the files area. So this makes it more difficult to create a landing zone using the Dataflow Gen 2. So the Dataflow Gen 2 is the one who can go outside and get the data from us, but it can't drop the files in the files area of the lakehouse. Makes things more difficult. Let's talk a bit about workarounds. How to work around this. One possibility, we can give up the landing zone and drop directly to browse. Some people don't like the landing zone. Some people think that project is simple enough to not have a landing zone. So you could drop directly the files to the browse area. Well, usually this kind of project grows. It grows to get more and more sources, to get bigger and more important inside the company. Adding a landing zone after the beginning, it would be very difficult. So I don't recommend to ignore the landing zone, but it's a possibility. Use one lakehouse data house as landing zone. So you will need to create one lakehouse or one data house specifically to be a landing zone, and then transfer the data from that lakehouse or data house to the browse area. Well, the fact that they are relational, I'm talking about the Dataflow Gen 2, loading the data to that. You would be using a relational area for that as a landing zone. It may make things a bit more difficult. And one of the details of the landing zone is to keep the same format as the source. This would not be possible. You would keep track of what you are loading, every load, but you would not be able to keep the same format as the source. Use a pre-landing zone. This means you load the data using Dataflow Gen 2 from one lakehouse or data house. You choose which one. This would be a pre-landing zone. Then from this place, you use a pipeline to load this data to the files area from your lakehouse. Then on the files area, you establish the landing zone. Once again, you lose the format. You lose the consistency of the format. The format will not be the same as the format of the source of the data, but it is a possibility. Use one Lake File Explorer. Instead of you going out and getting the data, you can use the One Lake File Explorer. The One Lake File Explorer works in a similar way as OneDrive. You would need external applications to drop the data to inside the One Lake for you, and that would be your landing zone. And that's it for today. You may have noticed that I'm not bringing a conclusion to this subject. I'm bringing questions, many questions and many possibilities. You need to be very creative in relation to this subject and to the design of the architecture using Microsoft Fabric. But it is very possible that most of what I'm explaining here will change when Microsoft Fabric reaches the GA version. So a lot of what I'm saying here may change in a close future. Thank you very much and see you next week on the next Fabric Monday.